In this video, we'll be looking at the Define Boundaries toolbox in Map My Property. So first, I'll expand the Define Boundaries toolbox. Before you produce a boundary, you should decide on how you want that boundary to appear. We can define the color, the style, the width, and the transparency of the boundary line. Using different boundary appearances allows us to more easily distinguish between multiple boundaries. For instance, you may want to delineate different forest stand boundaries or management areas within a tract boundary. By selecting a different color for stand delineations than used for the property boundary, you can make the map easier to interpret. For our example, I'll set the width to 5 points and leave everything else at the default values. Once the boundary appearance has been set, we can define the boundary. There are two ways to define a boundary. We can either delineate a boundary using the Draw tool, or we can load a GPX file that contains GPS points that were obtained with a handheld GPS unit. First, we'll look at drawing a boundary. To draw a boundary, click on Draw Boundary and add the property corners or vertexes to the map. To finish the boundary, just double-click on the last point. An acreage label will appear showing the size of the tract, and this can be removed by clicking on Clear Acres label. Map My Property also allows you to edit or change the shape of the boundary that you've already drawn. To modify the boundary, select a boundary line by clicking on it, and you'll notice it's selected because the vertices or the boundary corners will have a little square on it, as you can see. You can move existing boundary corners or vertices just by clicking on it and moving it. I'll move it back. You can add new ones by clicking on the boundary line and then just dragging it to wherever you want the new one to be. Or you can delete existing ones by right-clicking and selecting Delete Vertex. Each time this is done, a new acreage value is provided. As I said before, you may want to delineate forest stands or management areas within the tract. For this example, we'll divide the tract into 3 stands or management areas. But before I draw the stands, I'll change the appearance of the stand boundaries. I'll set the color to orange and the width to 2. So orange, and a width back to the default value of 2. To begin drawing, again I'll click on Draw Boundary and then just start drawing my stand boundaries. I'll draw a pine plantation on the west part of the tract. I'll draw a open area in the middle, central part of the tract. And then I'll draw a natural stand in the east part of the tract. If I really want to be picky, I can zoom in to each corner or vertex where the stands meet and refine where those points are located. But for this demonstration, I'm not going to bother with that. We can also delete boundaries. Let me draw this pond in the middle of the tract. So we got a 0.3 acre pond, clear the acres. And say I want to delete that one. I don't want that one anymore, or I shouldn't have drawn that one to begin with. I'm going to select it and then right click on and say delete me, so we no longer have that. The second way to define boundaries is to load a GPX file. A GPX or GPS exchange format file is a file that contains GPS points in a common GPS data format. So if you have a handheld GPS unit, you can load either waypoints or tracks. All you need is a GPX file and know the location of that file on your computer. So to load the GPX file, click on Load GPS Points, and then you'll need to navigate to the path or the location in which you have that file. For this example, I happen to already be in the right path, and you can either double click on it on the one that you want, or you can select it and click Open. And that'll bring in the points, and you'll see the points, and then after a few seconds the points will be converted to a polygon or boundary. So that's all for defining boundaries in Map My Property.